What if every storm, every twist of fate, and every challenge wasn't meant to break you, but to build something greater? This is the story of how love, promises, and resilience turned a simple life into an extraordinary legacy. Peter's passion for construction had its roots in his high school years, where he spent every summer working alongside his father in their family-owned business. Those long, sweltering days taught him the value of hard work and allowed him to develop essential skills that would one day define his career. Beyond learning the trade, those summers created cherished memories, with late-night planning sessions at the kitchen table, blueprints spread wide, strengthening his bond with his parents. In contrast, Polly grew up in a lively suburban neighborhood, where her love for adventure was ignited by frequent family trips to national parks. Those experiences gave her a deep appreciation for the outdoors and a zest for exploration. Her closest friendships with Emma and Shelley were formed during these excursions, creating a trio of inseparable friends who would go on to share countless adventures. Peter's life took a devastating turn when a tragic car accident claimed the lives of his parents. Left with immense grief and the daunting responsibility of managing their family business alone, he struggled to find his footing. The eventual sale of their assets offered only modest financial support, leaving him with a single plot of land and an old shed, places he often retreated to in his darkest moments. Meanwhile, Polly thrived in college, embracing the newfound freedom and independence it offered. Her adventurous nature flourished as she and her friends meticulously planned the ultimate summer road trip, an ambitious adventure they had dreamed about for years. Their paths first crossed during Peter's initial semester at community college. Though they came from different worlds, their connection was immediate. Peter's pragmatic outlook sharply contrasted with Polly's spontaneous and free-spirited personality, yet their shared drive to achieve their personal goals forged a strong bond between them. Despite occasional misunderstandings due to their contrasting temperaments, their relationship deepened. Peter grew to admire Polly's adventurous spirit, while she found comfort in his steady and dependable character. However, as they grew closer and began planning for a future together, their differences sometimes led to friction, hints of the challenges that lay ahead. One such moment arose unexpectedly during what should have been a casual conversation. As they drove to the theater for their usual date night, Peter had casually floated the idea of a week-long camping trip once Polly's semester ended. He had envisioned it as a way to unwind together after her busy school term. However, her response caught him completely off guard. "Peter," she said, finishing her thought, "you do remember that I'm leaving the day after my finals, right? Shelley, Emma, and I have been planning our road trip out west for months now. We're practically packed already." Peter gripped the steering wheel tightly, frustration bubbling just beneath the surface. He felt blindsided by her casual dismissal of his suggestion. "Polly," he said slowly, his voice tinged with disbelief, "we didn't even talk about this. You've been planning this trip, and I'm just hearing about it now." Her nonchalant tone only fueled his frustration further. He had imagined the camping trip as a way to reconnect, but now he was realizing that she had other plans entirely. "I can't believe you're still planning to go on that trip," Peter said, his voice tight with frustration. "When we got engaged, I thought we were going to start making plans together. Now you're just going to spend the entire summer with your friends, like nothing's changed between us." Polly's eyes blazed with defiance as she shot back, "Don't you dare insult my friends. Emma and Shelley are my closest friends, and I won't stand here and let you talk about them like that. You've known about this trip since we started dating. How is this any different from the time you spend away on your reserve duties?" Peter's jaw clenched, his patience thinning. "The difference, Polly, is that my trips are for work, serious, professional work. I'm not out there partying or fooling around. This trip of yours is just fun and games. If you go on that trip, we're done. I'm serious. You need to figure out what matters more to you, this relationship or that road trip. But if you choose to go, don't expect to see me in your house, your bed, or your life when you get back." Without waiting for her response, Peter turned on his heel and started walking away. Polly rushed after him, her voice rising in desperation. "Peter! Don't do this. You didn't even kiss me goodnight. Why are you acting like this?" He ignored her pleas, striding purposefully toward his truck. Just as he reached the door, Polly's voice rang out again, sharp and final. "Fine, Peter. Be mad all you want. I'm going on that trip, and that's final. When I get back, we'll talk about setting a wedding date. Get over it." The sound of her front door slamming echoed in his ears as he climbed into his old Ranger and drove away, his grip on the steering wheel tightening with each passing second. His mind swirled with anger, disappointment, and the sting of her words. When Peter pulled into his apartment complex, he was met by Polly's father, who seemed equally frustrated with his daughter's stubbornness. Without exchanging more than a curt handshake, Polly's father helped Peter unload the boxes from the truck and carry them inside. After the last box was set down, Peter gave a brief nod of thanks, then watched as her father walked away, leaving him alone in the now empty apartment. 2 years older than Polly, Peter had just earned his associate degree in construction management and was now working toward his bachelor's in project management. He dreamed of opening his own construction firm one day, a goal that kept him focused despite the mounting tension in his personal life. Balancing part-time jobs, National Guard reserve duties, and living off the GI Bill, he managed to stay debt-free while working steadily toward his ambitions. Though his heart was heavy with the turmoil of his relationship, Peter knew he needed something to keep his mind occupied. Fortunately, he still had the small plot of land his parents had left him. It wasn't much, but it was enough to plant a late crop of soybeans. The timing was just right to squeeze in one last planting before the season ended, though he'd need to hire someone to help with the harvest later. Still, it was work, and it gave him a purpose. With a plan forming in his mind, Peter hitched the plow to his old tractor and began tilling the field. The steady rumble of the engine and the rhythmic churn of the soil beneath the blade brought a welcome sense of calm, if only for a moment. He was halfway through his first pass when his neighbor, Mr. Jeffers, appeared at the edge of the field, waving him down. Cutting the engine, Peter climbed down from the tractor and walked over to greet him. "Morning, Mr. Jeffers," he said, offering a firm handshake. "Morning, Pete. Got yourself busy early today, huh?" the older man said, glancing at the freshly tilled rows. "Yeah, figured it was a good time to get something in the ground. I was actually hoping to borrow your no-till drill, if it's still available," Peter replied, wiping sweat from his brow. Jeffers gave a nod and gestured toward his property. "Come on over. It's in the shed, though I was tinkering with it earlier. Might need a few tweaks before it's ready to go." Following Jeffers across the field, Peter couldn't help but feel a flicker of gratitude. Between the emotional chaos with Polly and the weight of managing his life alone, it was reassuring to have neighbors like Jeffers, always willing to lend a hand or offer a tool. They reached the shed, where Jeffers had been working on a piece of equipment. Extending his hand once again, Peter said, "Thanks, Mr. Jeffers. I appreciate it." "No problem, Pete. You've always been a hard worker. If anyone can make good use of that drill, it's you," Jeffers said with a grin, clapping Peter on the shoulder. With that, Peter got to work, ready to tackle the day ahead and hoping the physical labor would ease the storm of emotions swirling inside him. "I'd like to give no-till a try and see how it stacks up against traditional planting," Pete said, shaking Jeffers' hand firmly. The older man let out a hearty chuckle and replied, "Call me Stan. You're a grown man now, Pete, and we're neighbors, friends, I hope. Heard you're a sergeant in the reserves. Should I be calling you Sergeant?" Pete laughed, shaking his head. "Not a chance. Just Pete's fine." As they exchanged smiles, Pete couldn't help but reflect on how things had changed over the past few years. Life hadn't exactly been easy, especially with Polly. There were times when her actions, casual flirting, overly friendly behavior with other men, had stirred something uneasy inside him. Even during deployments, friends had mentioned seeing her out with guys, looking and acting as though she was on dates. One friend had even sent him a blurry photo. Each time, Polly denied everything, offering what seemed like reasonable explanations. And yet, those explanations never fully erased the doubt. Though Pete tried to believe her, the seeds of mistrust had already taken root, growing stronger with each passing day. Now, with a six-pack of beer sitting beside him one evening, he confronted the truth he had been avoiding: he didn't trust Polly anymore. In fact, he wasn't even sure he loved her the way he once did. Determined to clear his head, Pete threw himself into a new project. In the colder months, he had always enjoyed the cave on his land, a natural formation overlooking a scenic bluff. He envisioned transforming it into a cozy winter retreat. Using old concrete blocks and stones, he planned to build a solid wall across the cave's entrance. Thankfully, he had already run electrical lines to the site years ago, so getting utilities up and running wouldn't be an issue. The cave was a manageable size, about 30 by 15 feet, and with a bit of work, Pete figured he could level the floor and pour a concrete base to make it more livable. With a clear goal in mind, he set to work, feeling a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in months. As dawn broke, Pete guided his tractor through the field, working with surprising efficiency. When he finally brought the tractor to a stop near the stream, he noticed something unexpected: a woman stepping down to the water and splashing around to cool off. Curious, he watched her for a moment before turning his attention back to his task. Not long after, she approached him, her smile warm and friendly. "Hi there. I'm Fiona Morgan," she said, extending a hand. "What are you doing with the old bluff?" Pete wiped his hands on his jeans and returned her smile. "Turning it into my home," he answered simply. "Just finishing up the porch. No offense, but I need to keep at it before the concrete sets." Fiona grinned. "No offense taken. Looks like you've got a solid plan." She paused for a moment, glancing at the surrounding landscape. "It's a beautiful spot, though. You're lucky to have it." They continued chatting, their conversation light and easy. Fiona's presence felt refreshing, a welcome distraction from the storm of thoughts that had plagued Pete for so long. Eventually, she sighed and glanced toward the direction of her home. "Well, I should probably head back. Chores won't do themselves." Before leaving, she turned back with a playful smile. "Mind if I swing by the creek once in a while to cool off?" Pete grinned. "Not at all. Just make some noise when you come by. I like to swim without, much on." Fiona laughed, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "Fair enough. Thanks, Pete. I'll see you around." As she walked away, Pete found himself smiling in spite of everything. Maybe things were starting to look up after all. "I might just sneak up on you then," Fiona teased with a playful smile. "Could be fun to catch you off guard." Pete chuckled, but there was something about the way she said it that lingered with him. Over time, he found himself looking forward to her visits, disappointed on the days when she didn't show. She had a way of making even the quiet moments enjoyable, and their easy conversations became the highlight of his evenings. One such evening, as he floated lazily in the stream, he finally gathered the courage to ask her out. "Fiona, how about we go out sometime?" he asked, trying to keep his tone casual despite the nerves bubbling inside him. Fiona raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "You're joking, right?" "Not at all," Pete replied, hiding his anxiety behind a steady voice. "But if you're not interested, that's fine. I just thought it'd be nice." Seeing the sincerity in his expression, Fiona softened. "I didn't mean to sound harsh," she said gently. "I just wasn't expecting that. You've always treated me like one of the guys, and, well, I'm not exactly the type who gets asked out a lot." Pete smiled. "Well, I don't see you as one of the guys. And I'm not exactly the smoothest when it comes to asking people out, so I figured I'd give it a shot." Before Fiona could respond, a distant rumble of thunder rolled through the sky, cutting their conversation short. The storm was approaching fast, and they quickly retreated to Pete's house for shelter. Inside, they hunkered down in the storage room, waiting for the worst to pass. Somewhere in the house, a window shattered, and then everything went eerily quiet except for the howling wind outside. Pete waited for 10 minutes, listening intently, before cautiously opening the storage room door. He motioned for Fiona to follow him into the main living area. The storm had left its mark. One of the front windows was shattered, shards of glass and rain covering the floor. Part of the porch roof had been torn off and blown inside. The bed was damp, though thankfully not completely soaked. Stepping outside into the drizzle, Pete surveyed the damage. The porch roof was gone, carried away by the fierce winds. The shed had fared slightly better, some of the metal siding and roofing remained intact, though much of the structure had folded under the storm's pressure. Curious to see the full extent of the damage, Pete and Fiona climbed to the top of the bluff overlooking the surrounding area. As they reached the summit, Fiona suddenly froze, gripping Pete's arm tightly. Her eyes widened in shock. "Oh no, Pete. Look at that, our farm. The house and barns, they're a mess." Her voice trembled with worry. "I need to check on Mom and Dad." Without waiting for a response, Fiona took off toward her truck, her pace quick and determined. Pete followed close behind, sensing her growing anxiety. When they arrived at her family's farm, they found one of the large trees uprooted and leaning against the house, partially blocking the cellar door. Fiona's heart raced as she called out for her parents, but there was no answer. Pete grabbed a saw from the back of his truck and began cutting away the branches that blocked the entrance. Once the path was clear, he pried open the cellar door, revealing a staircase leading down into the basement. Fiona wasted no time rushing down, shouting for her parents. "Mom! Dad!" A moment later, she let out a relieved sob as she saw them huddled together at the bottom of the stairs. She embraced them tightly, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. Pete stood nearby, offering silent support as the family reunited. When Fiona's father, Seth, emerged from the basement and took in the extent of the destruction, he stopped in shock. "It's bad," he muttered, his voice heavy with disbelief. "But at least we're all safe." For the rest of the day, Pete stayed to help, assisting with repairs where he could. He managed to replace the broken window to prevent further rain damage but was advised by Seth to hold off on any major work until they assessed everything properly. Back at his own place the next morning, Pete continued repairing the damage. He spent hours clearing debris from the machine shed until he finally freed his tractor. Luckily, aside from some dents in the sheet metal, it was still in working condition. He felt a wave of relief, knowing that the insurance policy he had taken out covered both his equipment and his property. By evening, the immediate repairs were done, but Pete knew there was still a long road ahead. For now, though, he allowed himself a moment of calm, grateful that despite the storm's fury, everyone was safe. Fiona and her father returned to Pete's place later that afternoon. The repairs were well underway, but there was still plenty to be done. Pete explained his latest plan. He intended to incorporate the existing 12 by 30-foot porch into the main structure and build a new wraparound porch on 3 sides of the house. Though the $7,500 he received for home repairs wouldn't cover everything, he estimated that the remaining costs would be manageable if he handled most of the work himself. His vision was ambitious but clear. He wanted to transform the cave area into a cozy bedroom while using the new addition for a spacious living area, kitchen, and office. He also planned to build a larger bathroom, accessible from both the bedroom and the main living space, to improve the overall layout. Everything was falling into place, and Pete felt energized by the progress. But just as things seemed to be moving forward, life threw an unexpected curveball. Pete's reserve unit called with deployment orders. He was being sent to Afghanistan for a year. Though the additional income from the deployment was a relief, it pained him to leave the farm unfinished, especially with so many plans still in the works. That evening, as they gathered around the small table, Pete broke the news to Fiona and her parents. Fiona's immediate reaction was a sharp, "Oh hell," followed by a tight, heartfelt hug. Sensing his worry, she whispered, "We'll be fine. Don't worry about us, Pete." He reassured them, saying, "You're welcome to stay here as long as you need. Finish rebuilding your house, and when I get back, we'll pick up where we left off." Their new home, a steel-framed structure, was still in its early stages, but they were determined to finish it before winter. Fiona's mother, Bridget, watched the exchange with a knowing grin. Setting down 3 cups of coffee on the table, she chuckled softly at Pete's sheepish expression. Sensing his discomfort, she spoke kindly, "Pete, I was wondering when you two would finally share a bed. It's obvious how much you care about each other. Seth and I have no issue with it. Fiona's a grown woman, and if she chooses to spend her nights with a man we deeply respect, it's her decision." Pete managed a grateful smile, feeling both relieved and a bit embarrassed by her straightforwardness. Fiona, meanwhile, flashed a teasing grin, clearly enjoying his reaction. A few weeks later, Pete arrived at the mobilization station where he and his unit began the grueling preparation process. The days were packed with medical and dental evaluations, personnel updates, legal briefings, and intensive training, including weapons qualification. During one of the legal sessions, Pete quietly updated his will, naming Fiona as his sole beneficiary. He didn't mention this to her, he didn't want to add any more weight to an already emotional goodbye. After 3 weeks of preparation, Pete's combat engineer unit boarded an aircraft bound for Kazakhstan, where they underwent a short acclimatization period before moving into Afghanistan. The deployment started smoothly enough, but Pete couldn't shake the weight of his memories, the lingering doubts and mistrust he'd experienced in his past relationship with Polly. With Fiona, things felt different, but he couldn't help but worry about being away for so long. Then, 3/4 of the way through the deployment, disaster struck. While working on a mountain road, Pete's unit came under sudden attack by insurgents. The firefight was intense, raging for nearly half an hour. Chaos erupted when the platoon sergeant was wounded, forcing Pete, as the next senior NCO, to step up and take command. Despite the chaos and danger, Pete's instincts kicked in. He quickly organized the remaining soldiers, assessed the situation, and provided cover for the medics. When the platoon leader was also hit, Pete found himself fully in charge, leading the soldiers through the harrowing ordeal. Under his leadership, they managed to hold their position until reinforcements arrived. Though they sustained injuries, every soldier in the platoon survived that day, a testament to Pete's steady hand under pressure. Months later, Pete's deployment finally came to an end. As the aircraft touched down back home, he felt a mix of exhaustion and relief. Walking through the crowded terminal, he scanned the sea of faces, hoping to spot Fiona. "Pete!" He barely had time to turn before Fiona launched herself into his arms, wrapping her arms and legs around him in an enthusiastic embrace. "I missed you so much," she exclaimed, peppering his face with kisses. "I'm so glad you're back. I've got your truck, what do you want to do first?" Pete laughed, holding her tightly. "Right now? I just want to be with you." For a moment, the world faded away. After months of uncertainty, this was exactly what he needed, a reminder of why he had worked so hard, endured so much. Fiona grinned, taking his hand as they headed toward the truck. Though the future was still uncertain, Pete knew one thing for sure, he was finally home, and they had plenty to look forward to, together. "It's almost lunchtime," Pete laughed, squeezing Fiona tightly. "I want good food, the kind I've been dreaming about for months." "Sure, we can make do with what's at home, but right now, I'm craving real pizza and a good steak. Let's start at House of Pizza. I used to love that place back in college." Fiona grinned. "Sounds perfect. After that, you can go home, sleep for a day, and eat some more. You've earned it." At the restaurant, they found a cozy corner table, the same one Pete used to sit at during his college days. The smell of fresh-baked pizza filled the air, making his stomach growl in anticipation. As they waited for their food, Pete excused himself to use the restroom. On his way back, something caught his eye, a tense exchange between Fiona and someone he didn't expect to see. Alarmed, he stepped closer and realized it was Polly, her face twisted in anger as she confronted Fiona. Before he could intervene, he heard Polly's venomous sneer. "I don't know what you think you're doing with my fiancé, you pathetic little, ___. I know his unit was deployed, but now that he's back, he's mine. So step aside, sweetheart." Fiona didn't flinch. Instead, she laughed coldly, her eyes flashing with defiance. "Your fiancé? Honey, Pete wouldn't take you back if you were the last woman on earth. You threw away your chance when you ditched him to go on that little road trip of yours. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have real plans with my man." Pete's heart swelled with a mix of pride and disbelief as he watched Fiona stand her ground. Polly's face darkened, but before things could escalate further, Pete stepped forward. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. Polly's expression faltered, and without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the restaurant. Fiona exhaled, visibly shaken, but when she met Pete's gaze, she managed a reassuring smile. "All good now," she said quietly. "Let's just enjoy lunch." The rest of the afternoon passed without incident, and soon they were on their way back to Pete's property. As they drove, Pete noticed Fiona's sudden change in mood. She had grown quieter, more reflective. Concerned, he finally asked, "What's going on? You've been acting a little weird since we left town." Fiona hesitated, chewing on her lip before answering. "Okay, don't be mad, but, while you were gone, I might have spent more of your money than you expected. Mom and Dad thought it was a good idea, and, well, I kind of went all in on the house. I hope you're not upset." Pete frowned, unsure of what she meant. As they pulled into the driveway, he stopped the truck abruptly, his eyes widening in shock. Before him stood his house, fully finished. The roof was complete, and a beautifully crafted wraparound porch framed 3 sides of the house. "What, how?" he stammered, stepping out of the truck. Fiona grabbed his hand, practically pulling him toward the house. "Come on, let me show you." At the front door, she gestured for him to enter, excitement evident in her voice. The addition had been built on the foundation of the old porch, blending seamlessly with the existing structure. Crossing to his desk, she handed him a bankbook and turned on the computer. Once it booted up, she opened his financial software and pointed to a detailed breakdown of every expense. Pete's jaw dropped as he scrolled through the numbers. His accounts were in far better shape than he had imagined. Fiona had only spent about half of what he had estimated for materials, managing the project with surprising efficiency. "How did you?" he began, still in disbelief. "I handled the labor costs by convincing a few of Dad's friends to help," Fiona explained with a grin. "We did most of the work ourselves, and they only charged us for what we couldn't handle. It saved a ton of money." Stepping outside, she pointed to where the tornado-damaged trees had been cleared, replaced by a brand-new shed tucked behind the house to store firewood safely out of the weather. Pete ran a hand through his hair, trying to take it all in. Every corner of the property had been carefully restored and improved. Back inside, Fiona led Pete to the bedroom, which had been carved out of the old cave space. She closed the door softly behind them, her expression shifting from excitement to something more tender. Stepping closer, she wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him into a kiss. "I missed you," she whispered, her voice low and full of emotion. "I just wanted everything to be perfect for when you got home." Pete smiled, pressing his forehead against hers. "It's better than perfect." "Thank you, Fiona." Later that night, as Fiona slept soundly beside him, Pete lay awake for a while, listening to the quiet hum of the wind outside. Everything had changed, yet somehow it all felt right. With a final glance at Fiona, he closed his eyes, finally feeling at peace. Pete wandered into the kitchen, grabbing a cold bottle of iced tea from the fridge. Stepping out onto the newly built porch, he sank into one of the comfortable chairs and let his eyes drift across the familiar landscape. The soft calls of cattle echoed in the distance, mingling with the faint bark of a neighbor's dog and the hum of a tractor from a nearby farm. The gentle trickle of the stream beside the house added a soothing rhythm to the serene backdrop. Everything felt right, peaceful, like home. He was so absorbed in the moment that he didn't notice Fiona until she stepped onto the porch, her bare feet making no sound on the wooden boards. She carried 2 steaming mugs of coffee, handing him one before settling into the chair beside him. "Good morning," she said, smiling softly. Pete smiled back, taking a sip of the coffee. The warmth of the mug contrasted with the cool morning air, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he felt completely at peace. The sun was beginning to rise, casting golden rays through the mist hovering over the stream. The birds sang cheerfully, and the sound of livestock stirring in the distance completed the idyllic scene. "I missed this," Pete said quietly. "The stillness, the sounds, it's been a long time since I felt this at ease." Fiona scooted her chair closer, resting her head on his shoulder. "It's home now, for both of us." She tilted her head playfully. "So, are we just going to sit here all day, or do you have any plans for us?" Pete chuckled. "I figured we could take it easy for a bit, then head over to your parents' place. I'm sure Seth and Bridget will want to hear all about the deployment, and see this ring you've been flaunting." Fiona grinned, holding up her hand and admiring the ring. "I do want to show it off. Mom's been hinting about grandkids ever since I told her we were serious." Pete nearly choked on his coffee, laughing. "One step at a time, Fi. Let's get through today first." Later that morning, they drove to Fiona's parents' house. As they pulled into the driveway, Pete noticed the progress they had made. Though there were still signs of the storm's destruction, the barns and house had been rebuilt, and the trees were starting to show signs of recovery. Still, a pang of sadness tugged at Pete's heart when he saw the new house, a simple metal structure with a small porch, so different from the charming 2-story home the tornado had destroyed. Seth greeted Pete with a firm handshake and a wide grin. "Welcome home, Sergeant," he said warmly, while Bridget pulled Pete into a tight hug. "It's good to have you back," Bridget said, her voice filled with genuine affection. "You've been missed around here." "Thanks. It's good to be back," Pete replied, feeling the warmth of their welcome. As they made their way inside, Fiona leaned into Pete, wrapping her arm around his and resting her head on his shoulder. The comfort of her touch made Pete smile. When they reached the truck later, Pete opened the door for her but was surprised when she climbed in without hesitation, her expression a mix of nerves and determination. "Fiona, what are you doing?" he asked, puzzled. She took a deep breath. "I'm coming with you," she said firmly. "I told Mom and Dad already. I want to be with you. If you don't want me to, I'll understand, but this is what I want." Pete paused, gathering his thoughts. He reached out, taking her hand gently. "Fiona, you know I love you, right? I just want to make sure this is what you truly want." "It is," she said without hesitation, leaning in and giving him a quick kiss. "I've already moved some of my stuff to your place. While you were gone, I stayed there a lot, looking after things, and it started feeling more like our home than just yours." Pete blinked in surprise. "More of your things," he repeated, amused. Fiona blushed. "I hope you don't mind. I just figured it made sense. And now that you're back, I want to make it official. If you'll have me." Pete smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and love. "Of course, I'll have you. I wouldn't want it any other way." By the time they arrived back at Pete's house, it was well past noon. They walked arm in arm to the front door, where Fiona flipped on the light as Pete headed to the couch. His duffel bag still sat where he had left it earlier. Digging through its contents, he tossed items onto the floor until he found what he was looking for, a small box he had been saving for this moment. Fiona watched curiously as Pete walked over, holding the box tightly. "What's that?" she asked. "It's something I picked up while I was deployed," Pete said, opening the box to reveal a delicate necklace with a small, intricately carved charm. "I thought of you when I saw it." Fiona's eyes lit up as she took the necklace, her fingers brushing over the charm. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you." She pulled him into another hug, resting her head on his chest. "You know, it's not just the house or the things inside that make this place feel like home, it's you, Pete. You're home to me." Pete wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. "And you're home to me too, Fi. Now, how about we clean up and get some rest? We've got a busy day tomorrow, showing off that ring and grabbing more of your things." Fiona smiled teasingly. "Fine, but only if we can have breakfast before noon tomorrow. I don't want Mom asking what we were doing that made breakfast so late again." Pete laughed, feeling more at peace than he had in a long time. Together, they headed to the bedroom, ready to start the next chapter of their lives, together. "I thought I taught you better than that," Seth said with a snort of laughter, earning a sharp glance from Bridget, who quickly put him in his place. Pete and Fiona exchanged amused smiles as the warmth of family filled the room, a feeling that had grown stronger over the years, binding their two families together. Years later, after the birth of their second child, the families made a big decision: they traded homes. Seth and Bridget moved into Pete and Fiona's cozy cave home, while Pete and Fiona took over the larger main house to accommodate their growing family. Seth and Bridget stayed there happily until their passing, leaving behind cherished memories and a legacy of love and support. Pete eventually retired from the Army Reserve after an impressive 40 years of service, having risen to the esteemed rank of Command Sergeant Major. His military career had been one of dedication and leadership, but it was his role as husband, father, and grandfather that defined his greatest pride. As the years passed, their youngest son took over managing the family's combined farm, allowing Pete and Fiona to spend their later years enjoying the life they had built together. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Pete and Fiona sat together on the porch of the main house, watching the golden light dance across the fields. The sounds of laughter drifted on the breeze, grandchildren playing by the stream, likely learning to skip stones just as Fiona had taught their own children so many years ago. "I never imagined it would turn out like this," Pete murmured, his voice filled with quiet awe. Fiona, her silver hair catching the soft glow of twilight, smiled warmly. "Neither did I," she replied. "But every twist, every challenge, every moment brought us here. And I wouldn't change a single thing." Pete reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease and confidence of two souls who had weathered every storm together. The years had softened their features, but the love between them remained steadfast, a beacon that had guided them through life's trials and triumphs. "Through it all, you've been my compass, Fiona," Pete said softly, emotion thick in his voice. "You've always shown me where home is, where it's always been." Fiona leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "And you've been my anchor, Pete. You've kept us grounded and strong." As twilight deepened, Pete thought back to the promises he had made over the years. He had vowed never to return to Polly after she left him, a promise he had upheld without a single regret. He had pledged to love, honor, and cherish Fiona, a commitment he had lived out every day of their life together. And he had made a solemn promise to her father, to care for Fiona always. That promise had shaped his life's greatest purpose and brought him immeasurable joy. The years had weathered them both, but they sat together now, content in the knowledge that they had built a legacy, one of love, family, and resilience. Their love had endured, becoming a testament to the power of faith and partnership, and a shining example for the generations that followed. As the laughter of their grandchildren filled the air and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Pete tightened his hold on Fiona's hand. "Every moment with you has been a gift," he whispered. "And we still have more moments to come," Fiona added with a smile, her eyes gleaming with the same spark that had first drawn Pete to her so many years ago. Together, they sat in peaceful silence, watching the night settle over the farm that had become their legacy, knowing that their love would continue to shine, a guiding light for all who came after them.